Hallelujah. Praise Yahuwah. Praise Yahuwah. For Yahuwah is greatly to be praised. He is to be feared above all mighty ones. Hallelujah. Some trust in chariots and some in horses, but we will remember the name of Yahuwah our mighty one. Hallelujah. 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 Praise Yahuwah. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. I'd like to welcome everyone to qodeshnation and to our Shabbat class. Praise Yahuwah. Brothers and sisters, the title to the lesson is The Easy Yoke in the Hard-Pressed Way. The easy yoke in the hard-pressed way. Praise Yahuwah. Brothers and sisters, the statement that I just made to you, whether you realize it or not, is a paradox. Now, I'm going to explain to you what a paradox is. Praise Yahuwah. But both of these are statements that Yahushua HaMashiach made. But the statement, as I read it, the title of this lesson, The Easy Yoke and the Hard-Pressed Way, it is a paradox. What a paradox is a seemingly contradictory statement that when investigated, it's found to be true. A seemingly contradictory statement. But when investigated, it's found to be true. Black Israelites. It's a paradox. People, black Israelites. Israelites aren't black. But then you investigate it. Guess what? It's true. Hallelujah. So that's what a paradox is. You see, it's not contradictory. It's seemingly contradictory. It appears to you to be contradictory, but when you investigate the matter, then it's found to be true. And I believe it's important that we deal with this particular paradox, brothers and sisters. Praise Yahuwah, because we all want to find the will of Yah for our lives, and if we're not careful, then we can take a statement of Yahusha's or just a statement even anywhere in the scriptures, and we can run with it without just balancing it out with what the rest of the scripture says. Because I believe it's in Psalm 119, 160, where it says, the sum of thy word is truth. So it's like having a dozen eggs. If you take a carton of a dozen eggs, if you take one egg out of that carton, you no longer have a dozen eggs. And so if Yah has had 4 or 5 things to say, let's say Yah has had 5 things to say about a certain matter, and you take away one of those things that Yah says, you don't have the complete truth on that matter. Yeah, partial truth, but you don't have the complete truth because you've taken away, said do not add to or take away from His Word. Praise Yahuwah. And see, this is especially important when we're dealing with the easy yoke and then the hard-pressed way. In fact, what I want to do, let me go ahead and get into the word here, and then I'll complete that statement that I was making. I want to explain to you why it's important that we deal with this particular paradox. All right, Matthew, and it's Matthew chapter 11 that we want to look at. Matthew 11. Just to get a context, we are going to start in verse 20, and it reads, Then he began to reproach the cities in which most of his miracles had been done, because they did not repent. This is speaking of Yahushua. Woe to you, Chorazin! Woe to you, Bethsaida! Because if the miracles which were done in you had been done in Sor and Sidon, they would have repented long ago in sackcloth and ashes. But I say to you, it shall be more bearable for Sor and Sidon in the day of judgment than for you. And you, Kafar Nahum, who were exalted to the Shamayim, shall be brought down to the grave, because if the miracles which were done in you had been done in Sodom, it would have remained until this day. But I say to you that it shall be more bearable for the land of Sodom in the day of judgment than for you. At that time, Yahushua, responding, said, I thank you, Father, Adon of the Shamayim and earth, because you have hidden these from clever and learned ones and have revealed them to children. Yes, Father, because so it was well-pleasing in your sight. All have been handed over to me by my Father, and no one knows the Ben except the Father, nor does anyone know the Father except the Ben, and he to whom the Ben wants to reveal him. Come to me, all you who labor and are burdened, and I shall give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am meek and humble in heart, and you shall find rest for your beings. For my yoke is gentle, and my burden is light. Now, I mentioned the easy yoke because in the King James it says, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. So most people are familiar with this passage using those terms. My yoke is easy and my burden is light. Praise Yahuwah. And so just looking at that on the surface, that what that looks like is that, hey, if you follow Yahushua, if you serve Yahushua, then it's not hard. It's not hard. In fact, I mean, it's easy. You know, and so there shouldn't be anything hard about following Yahushua. You know, there shouldn't be anything burdensome about following him, because he said his yoke is easy and his burden is light. Praise Yahuwah. Now, turn with me to Matthew 7. Matthew 7. In Matthew 7, and we will start in verse 13. It reads, Enter in through the narrow gate, because the gate is wide and the way is broad that leads to destruction, and there are many who enter in through it. Because the gate is narrow and the way is hard pressed, which leads to chai, leads to life, and there are few who find it. But beware of the false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are savage wolves. By their fruits you shall know them. Are grapes gathered from thorn bushes, or figs from thistles? So every good tree yields good fruit, but a rotten tree yields wicked fruit. A good tree is unable to yield wicked fruit, and a rotten tree to yield good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. So then, by their fruits you shall know them. Not everyone who says to me, Adonai, Adonai, shall enter into the reign of the Shamayim, but he who is doing the desire of my Father in the Shamayim. Many shall say to me in that day, Adonai, Adonai, have we not Nabu, or prophesied in your name, and cast out demons in your name, and done many mighty works in your name? And then I shall declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who work lawlessness. Praise Yahuwah. So I read all of that together because it all runs together in this passage. It talks about the broad way, and then the narrow or the hard-pressed way. And then it talks about things that tend to put people on the broad way. Number one, listening to false prophets. False prophets themselves are on the broad way. You listen to them, and they'll get you on the broad way with them. And then, number two, just being off in our focus. Being so into ministry activity and being used of Yah that we forget the conclusion of the whole matter, which is to fear Yahuwah and to keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. And so this all runs together, but I wanted to deal with the first couple verses that I read. In fact, the second verse I read, verse 14, it says, Because the gate is narrow and the way is hard pressed, which leads to life, and there are few that find it. Praise Yahuwah. Now, the visual picture that we have brothers and sisters, because in the King James it says that it is narrow, and here in the Hallelujah Scriptures it's more accurate to the original language. It says it is hard pressed. The way is hard pressed. Now, when you have let's say you're in a forest, because that's frequently what they would do in the ancient times, is they clear away trees and brush in the forest, and they would make a way. They would make a road. And so if the way that they make is wide, they clear out a bunch of trees and a bunch of bushes, then hey, it's easy to walk through. You can just walk through it with ease and comfort, and it's no big deal. But if the way that is made is narrow, where they clear out a few trees in a few bushes, where in order for you to get through that way, it's hard pressed. You got it's hard pressed. And see, that imagery squares with what Yahushua said in the book of Luke, where when they said to him, Master, good Master, are there few that be saved? Are there few that be saved? How did he answer them? He said, strive to enter in at the strait gate. For many, I say unto you, shall seek to enter in and shall not be able. That word strive, the Greek word for strive, means to agonize. And so that agonizing, it gives that same mental picture as what I just demonstrated before you, where you have a little space here that's maybe about 18 inches that's been cleared away for you, and you got to squeeze your way through that, and you got to, every step of the way, you got to put that effort into it. So, looking at that imagery, okay, that I just gave you about the hard-pressed way, you see why it's a paradox. The easy yoke in the hard-pressed way. How can we be called to bear his easy yoke in light burden, but be called to agonize to enter in the hard-pressed way at the same time? Praise Yahuwah. And so that's what we're here to figure out, brothers and sisters, through the Scriptures, because the Scriptures do give us the answer. The Scriptures do give us the understanding. Now, I told you I'd tell you why that I'm bringing this lesson forth. That if we misunderstand what Yahushua is saying, praise Yahuwah, then what can happen is that we can see the things that he said, and we can choose to focus in on his light burden and his easy yoke, and we could think he's saying something that he's not saying. And we could think that this is an easier walk, or it's supposed to be an easier walk than what it really should be. We could think that there shouldn't be anything in this walk that is just a real trial for us to deal with. Shouldn't be anything that Yah calls us to give up. This is hard for us to give up. Something just grievous for us to let go of. That it shouldn't be that way. See, if we're too focused on that aspect of what Yahushua is saying, we can get that wrong idea. And what that does is it runs directly contrary to what he said about striving to enter in at the hard-pressed way. Praise Yahuwah. So we're going to continue in the Scriptures. And where I want to go next is 1 John. 1 John chapter 5. And see, that's another reason why I went ahead and read further in Matthew 7, talking about what's going to put people on the broad road, just with the false prophets, and also with just having our focus off, not being focused on keeping the commandments, but being focused on all this ministry activity. Praise Yahuwah. Is that we have, brothers and sisters, one of the commands in Torah is that we be Kodesh, even as Yahuwah is Kodesh. And if you have if you've been in the churches, like we have, then you know the different types of churches that are out there. You have your regular denominational churches, and you have your Pentecostal type churches, and especially amongst the Pentecostal ranks, you have what's called your holiness churches. Now, your holiness churches, that they tend to have more rules and more standards in their churches than you'd see just in the regular denominational churches. That's why these churches tend to be smaller. These churches tend to not have as much money and not have not have a lot of people in those churches making a whole lot of money, like doctors and lawyers and people like that. But they tend to be simple folk. And you have people that really kick against a lot of the standards and the rules that they have, because some of the standards and rules they have are scriptural now, but some of them are not. And it's mainly because they don't, most of them don't have the understanding of Torah. So they know that there are rules to live by, but because they're not making that Torah connection, that they end up coming up with some rules of their own. Just to give you an example of that, I was talking to a man who got he got immersed in the United Pentecostal Church. And he said that he approached the preacher and asked him, hey, I want to be baptized. I want to be baptized in J.C. name. And the preacher looked at him and see that, and the man had some hair on his chin. And the man said, hey, you better take care of that. You got to take care of that first. In other words, you got to shave that beard off before we baptize you. Because that was their church rule. That was their church tradition. And I asked the preacher about that one time. This was an ex-UPC preacher that had come to believe in Sabbath keeping and clean foods. And he didn't embrace Torah altogether, but he did believe in those things. I said that, why does the UPC make a rule that you can't wear a beard when the scripture says not to mar the corners of your beard? And he said that a lot of that came from the 1960s, where you had like the hippies and the bikers, and how they would wear long beards and long hair. And so in order to differentiate themselves from them, that's kind of what they came up with. And so that's what I'm talking about, as far as when you don't deal with Torah, but you know that Yah has a standard to live by, you can make up some standards of your own if you're not careful. Praise Yahuwah. But, the reason why I brought all of that up, brothers and sisters, is that, none of us want to be into any man-made tradition. We don't want to add to or take away from the word that Yah has given us. But at the same time, a lot of times when people kick against standards of qodeshnation, they are kicking against something that's of Yah. They are kicking against something that's scriptural, or something that Yah himself is trying to deal with his people on. Praise Yahuwah. And we need to make sure that we're not despising the call to qodeshnation. Because, see, I've heard people be confused on this issue ever since I was back in Christianity. I'd hear people talk about that his yoke is easy, his burden is light. Praise Yahuwah. And meaning that he wouldn't put any burdensome standards on us. He wouldn't call us to do something that is just so grievous to us. Praise Yahuwah. And I've heard people say that in reference to things that really were of Yah. I'm not talking about man's tradition. I'm talking about things that are scriptural. Praise Yah. Now let's listen to this. 1 John 5. 1 John 5. And I'll continue with this thought. It says, everyone, starting in verse 1, everyone that believes that Yahushua HaMashiach has been born of Elohim, and everyone who loves the one bringing forth also loves the one having been born of him. By this we know that we love the children of Elohim, when we love Elohim, when we love Yahuwah and guard his commands. For this is the love of Yahuwah, that we guard his commands, and his commands are not heavy. Because everyone having been born of Elohim overcomes the world, and this is the overcoming that has overcome the world, our belief. So verse 3 says his commandments are not heavy. Other versions say his commandments are not grievous, or his commandments are not burdensome. Praise Yahuwah. And that is the truth. His commandments are not grievous. His commandments are not burdensome. But as we go further in the scriptures, brothers and sisters, we're going to see this paradox become more and more clear to us as to why we have these seemingly contradictory statements by Yahushua. Let's turn to Proverbs 15. That's the next place we're going to turn. Proverbs chapter 15. Proverbs chapter 15. We're going to read one verse here. Verse 10. It says, discipline is grievous to him who forsakes the way. He who hates reproof dies. Now, in the King James it says, correction is grievous unto him that forsakes the way. So that may be how you're used to seeing that verse. And so discipline or correction, it said it is grievous. In discipline and correction is grievous to him who forsakes the way. See, let's not forget that part. To him who forsakes the way. Discipline or correction is grievous. Praise Yahuwah. All right, continuing on in Psalm 141. Psalm 141. Because we're going to see the same basic subject being dealt with, but we're going to see a different angle on it. This is a psalm of David. Psalm 141, verse 5. It says, let the righteous one smite me, or reprove me in kindness. It is oil on my head. Let my head not refuse it. My prayer is still against their evil deeds. Let me stop there. Praise Yahuwah. In King James it says, let the righteous smite me, it shall be a kindness, and let him reprove me, it shall be an excellent oil. Same thing. Praise Yahuwah. But here we're talking about the same basic thing. We're talking about discipline. We're talking about correction. But see, the difference is that Daud here, he had a different heart than the one being spoken of in Proverbs 15:10, where correction was grievous unto one who forsakes the way. But we know that Daud did not forsake the way. Daud embraced the way. And so we see correction and discipline being received with joy. Praise Yahuwah, because he realizes the benefit of that. Whereas the one to whom it is grievous does not see the benefit in that. And so in that respect, we cannot say that correction and discipline is grievous. We can say it's grievous unto him who forsakes the way, but we see Daud here, and it's certainly not grievous unto him. Praise Yahuwah. Hallelujah. All right, continuing on. I want to look at some examples here. Let's go to Bereshit, Genesis 21. I want us to see some examples of righteous men. And I think these are good examples because it shows that, we're all human. We're all human. We have feelings. We all have to deal with our feelings. Praise Yahuwah. But I want to show you righteous men. These are a few examples of righteous men who had a problem with the commandment or decree or judgment or decision of Yah, that they had a problem with it. Praise Yahuwah. Now, let's say at Yaakov, James, he said, be angry and sin not. So you can be angry and sin not. Praise Yahuwah. And I want to show you examples of this. I want to show you examples where the command, the decree, the judgment, the decision of Yah was grievous, even unto righteous men. All right, Genesis 21, and we are going to start at the top. It says, and Yahuwah visited Sarah as he had said, and Yahuwah did for Sarah as he had spoken. So Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age, at the appointed time of which Elohim had spoken to him. And Abraham called the name of his son who was born to him, whom Sarah bore to him, Yitzchak. And Abraham circumcised his son Yitzchak when he was 8 days old, as Elohim had commanded him. And Abraham was 100 years old when his son Yitzchak was born to him. And Sarah said, Elohim has made me laugh, and everyone who hears of it laughs with me. And she said, who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? For I have borne him a son in his old age. And the child grew and was weaned, and Abraham made a great feast on the day that Yitzchak was weaned. And Sarah saw the son of Hagar the Mitzrite, whom she had borne to Abraham, mocking. So she said to Abraham, drive out this female servant and her son, for the son of this female servant shall not inherit with my son Yitzchak. And the matter was very evil in the eyes of Abraham because of his son. Now, in the King James it said it was very grievous. The matter is grievous unto Abraham because of his son. But Elohim said to Abraham, let it not be evil or grievous in your eyes because of the boy and because of your female servant. Whatever Sarah has said to you, listen to her voice, for in Yitzchak your seed is called. In the son of the female servant I also make a nation, because he is your seed. And Abraham rose early in the morning and took bread and a skin of water which he gave to Hagar, putting it on her shoulder, also the boy, and sent her away, and she left and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba. Praise Yahuwah. So, brothers and sisters, we have a situation here where Abraham was so attached to this boy, to Ishmael, praise Yahuwah, that when his wife spoke that, his wife, if you look at the words she spoke, she was more or less reiterating what Yah had already told him. See, she wasn't saying anything new to him. Yah had already told him this, and she was just restating it, praise Yahuwah. And so it was so grievous unto him. This was the decree of Yah, and he knew it was the decree of Yah, but it was grievous unto him. But it was grievous unto him because of his personal attachment to his son. And how that even though he had received that word in the past, he still had that attachment that he didn't want to let go of. And Yah had to communicate with him directly and tell him, listen to Sarah. All right, listen to Sarah and let that boy go, and the woman. Praise Yahuwah. Because like I said, Sarah was just restating what Yah had already told him. And so it's because now Abraham obeyed, so he didn't sin. He obeyed, but he was grieved, but he had to bring his soul subject to the will of Yah. He had to accept the will of Yah. And once he accepted the will of Yah, he was able to get over it. Once he accepted the will of Yah, but when he was in a state where he wasn't fully receptive of the will of Yah, he may have received it outwardly. In Yitzchak shall your seed be called. Okay, yeah, that's great. Praise Yah. But he didn't really receive it in his heart. And it wasn't until he really received it in his heart that he was able to just get over it and move on. But this is a good example of a righteous man to whom the command of Yah was grievous. It was grievous unto him because he in his heart had not fully accepted the will of Yah in this area yet. That's why he was grieved. Praise Yahuwah. Another example be 2 Samuel chapter 6. 2 Samuel 6. 2 Samuel 6, we're going to start in verse 1. Now Daud again gathered all the chosen men of Yashrael, 30,000. Daud rose up and went with all the people who were with him to Baal-Yehudah, to bring up from there the ark of Elohim that is called by the name of Yahuwah of hosts, who dwells between the cherubim. And they placed the ark of Elohim on a new wagon and brought it from the house of Abinadab, which is on the hill. And Uzzah and Ahio, sons of Abinadab, were leading the new wagon. And they brought it from the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill with the ark of Elohim. And Ahio was walking before the ark. And Daud and all the house of Yashraal were dancing before Yahuwah with all fir wood instruments, and with lyres, and with harps, and with tambourines, and with sistrums, and with cymbals. And when they came to the threshing floor of Nachan, Uzzah reached out toward the ark of Elohim and took hold of it, for the oxen stumbled. And the wrath of Yahuwah burned against Uzzah, and Elohim smote him there for the fault, and he died there by the ark of Elohim. And Daud was displeased, because Yahuwah had broken out against Uzzah, and he called the name of the place Peretz Uzzah until this day. And Daud was afraid of Yahuwah on that day, and said, Who shall the ark of Yahuwah come? How shall the ark of Yahuwah come to me? And Daud would not move the ark of Yahuwah with him into the city of Daud, but Daud turned it aside to the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite. Praise Yahuwah. So we see that Daud was displeased. He even named the city. Praise Yahuwah, just according to his displeasure. Called the name of it Peretz Uzzah, because of the breach that was made. Praise Yahuwah. This was the judgment of Yah now. This was the judgment of Yah, and Daud knew it was the judgment of Yah. Praise Yahuwah. But see, it's like, it reminds me of Rehoboam, Shalomo's son, and how he had forsaken the Torah of Yahuwah, and all Yashraal forsook it also. And Yah was displeased, so he sent Shishak, the sovereign of Mitzrayim, and when Rehoboam and the elders got word that Shishak had come and attacked the city, that they humbled themselves and said, Yahuwah is righteous. Yahuwah is righteous. Because of the judgment. This was something that was adverse to them. This was something that wasn't in their favor. But they humbled themselves and said, Yahuwah is righteous. They accepted the punishment of their iniquity. And that's where Yah said, all right, I'll lighten the load here. Praise Yahuwah. I won't let, Shishak just completely have his way. I'll lighten the load because you all humbled yourselves before me. Daud didn't humble himself before Yahuwah when this happened. He was displeased at this. Daud didn't say, oh, you're righteous in your judgments, Yahuwah. No, he did not. He was displeased. The judgment, the decree of Yahuwah was grievous unto him at that time. And he had to humble himself afterwards and accept the will of Yahuwah, but at that time it was grievous to him. And Daud is a righteous man now. Now, what I want to look at now is I've given you righteous examples, righteous men who were grieved at the decree, decision, judgment of Yahuwah. I want to give you an example now in Matthew 19. Now, this isn't a righteous man, but I'm going to contrast this man with someone who is righteous, because I want to show you a very similar scenario that brought grief to one man, but brought joy to another. Praise Yahuwah. So Matthew chapter 19, we're going to start in verse 16. And see, one came and said to him, Good teacher, what good shall I do to have everlasting chai, everlasting life? And he said to him, Why do you call me good? No one is good except one, Elohim. But if you want to enter into chai, guard the commands. If you want to enter into life, keep the commandments. And he said to him, Which? And Yahushua said, You shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness. Respect your father and your mother, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. And the young man said to him, All these I have watched over from my youth. What do I still lack? Yahushua said to him, If you want to be perfect, go sell what you have and give to the poor, and you shall have treasure in the Shamayim, and come, follow me. And when the young man heard the word, he went away sad, because he had many possessions. And Yahushua said to his Talmudim, Truly I say to you that it is hard for a rich man to enter into the reign of the Shamayim. Again I say to you, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter into the reign of Elohim. And when his Talmudim heard it, they were very astonished, saying, Who then is able to be saved? And looking intently, Yahushua said to them, With men this is impossible, but with Elohim all is possible. Praise Yahuwah. So there's another account, I believe it's in Mark's account, where he said, come, take up your stake and follow me. Because Yahushua has said before that if any man will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his stake daily and follow me. And so this is what this rich young ruler was called to do. And this call was grievous. It was grievous unto him, but it was grievous unto him because of his attachment to his wealth, his attachment to his possessions, and everything that brought him. If he was a ruler, then no doubt his possessions brought him fame and honor and respect among the community. And so he was so attached to that. It's like it says, and I believe it's John 12, where it talks about many of the chief rulers believing on Yahushua, but they would not confess him because they loved the praise of men more than the praise of Elohim. And so we see the situation here with this rich young ruler. He was attached to his goods, to his mammon, and he couldn't let it go. And that's why it was so grievous to him, and so grievous that he turned and walked away. He did not obey the call. Praise Yahuwah. Now, by contrast, I want to look at Luke 19. We had Matthew 19, now we're going to look at Luke 19. We're going to look at a contrast. We're going to look at a similar situation. We're going to see a man who responded different. He responded in a different manner. Luke 19, starting at the top, it says, and having entered, he was passing through Jericho, and see a man called Zacchaeus, and he was a chief tax collector, and he was rich, and he was seeking to see who Yahushua was, but was unable because of the crowd, for he was small in stature. And having run ahead, he climbed up into a sycamore tree to see him, because he was about to pass by. And as Yahushua came to the place, he looked up and saw him, and said to him, Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I have to stay at your house today. And he hurried and came down and received him, rejoicing. And seeing it, they all grumbled, saying, he has gone in to stay with a man who is a sinner. But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Adon, look, Adonai, I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I have taken whatever from anyone by false accusation, I repay fourfold. And Yahushua said to him, today deliverance has come to this house, since he also is a son of Abraham, for the Ben of Adam, the Son of Man, has come to seek and to save what was lost. Praise Yahuwah. So when we contrast these two men, brothers and sisters, number one, Zacchaeus wasn't told to let go of his goods. He initiated it. This was his idea. This came from his heart. Praise Yahuwah. Because he was a wealthy man too, like this rich young ruler. But see, the thing that is so sad is that in order to be a ruler in Yashraal, that you have to have honor and respect amongst the community. That people would have, if Yahushua would have went to eat and to dine at the rich young ruler's house, see, people would have looked favorably upon that. But see, he went to sup with Zacchaeus, and people looked down upon that. People grumbled. They say he's going to be with a man that is a sinner. See, the rich young ruler, he had much more honor in society and before man than Zacchaeus did, but in the eyes of Yah, it was the opposite. Praise Yahuwah, because that rich young ruler, he threw down the stake. He said, no way. Whereas Zacchaeus, he initiated it. Praise Yahuwah. He initiated it, and he said, I give half of my possessions to the poor. If I've taken whatever from anyone by false accusation, I repay fourfold. So by him doing that, see, he gave half of his possessions, but the other half of his possessions, there's no telling how much less he would end up having after repaying fourfold people that he had ripped off. And so seeing this kind of heart and attitude in Zacchaeus, even if Zacchaeus was given that charge by Yahushua, like the rich young ruler, sell what you have, give to the poor, come, take up your stake and follow me. We see he had such a heart to do so. Praise Yahuwah. Because there's no telling what he ended up having left after repaying all those people fourfold. Praise Yah. And so that we see how that giving up the goods like that, because Yahushua says, except a man forsake all that he has, he cannot be my Talmud. And see, that call was grievous unto the rich young ruler because of his attachment to his wealth. But see, it wasn't grievous, but it was joyous unto Zacchaeus. Praise Yahuwah. So joyous that he even initiated it. He didn't even have to be told to do that. Praise Yahuwah. So we see the same scenario, but see, we see a different result depending on the condition of the heart of the individual. Praise Yahuwah. And so, brothers and sisters, see what we're seeing here. What we're seeing is that when we talk about his yoke being easy, his burden is light. Praise Yahuwah. See, Zacchaeus was bearing an easy burden. He was bearing a light burden in an easy yoke. Mm-hmm. Praise Yahuwah. But the rich young ruler, not to him. Rich young ruler, it was a heavy burden. It was a heavy yoke. And it was grievous. Same situation now. Same situation in two different men. Praise Yah. And so, like the situation with Ishmael, with Abraham, that could have been a light burden. That could have been an easy yoke, depending on the condition of his heart. But it was grievous unto him. Even though Yah had already spoke to him, he wasn't ready to just give it up like that. Praise Yahuwah. And so, we're seeing the answer to this paradox, brothers and sisters, that it really depends upon the condition of a person's heart. That once we get our heart right with Yahuwah, then truly that his yoke is easy and his burden is light. But if we're still hanging on to something, if we're still attached to something that Yah doesn't want us to be attached to, then it can be grievous. It can be burdensome. And so with that in mind, I want to close this out. Praise Yahuwah. I want to close this out with a passage in Sirach. Now, some of y'all may have heard me minister on this before. I'm going to Sirach, which is Ecclesiasticus, not Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiasticus. It's out of the Apocrypha. Sirach chapter 6. Praise Yahuwah. In Sirach chapter 6, and we're going to start in verse 18, because some of you all have heard me give a lesson on this very thing that we're about to talk about the fetters and chains of wisdom. If you remember that lesson that I gave, it's up on YouTube, the fetters and chains of wisdom. In fact, I would recommend that you go back and go over that lesson after going through this lesson, because it'll go into more detail about what I'm talking about here, but this is just going to serve to confirm what we've already read and what we've talked about in this lesson. Praise Yahuwah. So, Sirach chapter 6, verse 18 is where we're going to start. It says, "My son, gather instruction from your youth up, so shall you find wisdom till your old age. Come unto her as one who plows and sows, and wait for her good fruits. For you shall not toil much in laboring about her, but you shall eat of her fruits right soon. She is very unpleasant to the unlearned. He that is without understanding will not remain with her. She will lie upon him as a mighty stone of trial, and he will cast her from him ere it be long. For wisdom is according to her name, and she is not manifest unto many. Give ear, my son, and receive my advice, and refuse not my counsel, and put your feet into her fetters, and your neck into her chain. Bow down your shoulder and bear her, and be not grieved with her bonds." Praise Yahuwah. "Come unto her with your whole heart, and keep her ways with all your power. Search and seek, and she shall be known unto you. And when you have got hold of her, let her not go, for at the last you shall find her rest. Come unto me, all you that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." So, for at the last you shall find her rest. and that shall be turned to your joy. Then shall her fetters be a strong defense for you, and her chains a robe of esteem. For there is a golden ornament upon her, and her bands are purple lace. You shall put her on as a robe of honor, and shall put her about you as a crown of joy. Hallelujah. Praise Yahuwah. And so that's about the best passage I could find in all the scriptures that sums up what I'm saying to you today, brothers and sisters, about this paradox of the easy yoke and the hard-pressed way. Praise Yahuwah. That what we're told by Sirach, this man of wisdom, praise Yahuwah, is that this is a process. This is a process that if we're confronted with something, or Yah's dealing with us on something, and it's something that just seems grievous for us to let go of, we should never assume that it's just not from Yah. Praise Yahuwah. Simply because Yahushua said that his commandments are not grievous. His yoke is easy, his burden is light. Praise Yahuwah. But always, always pray and seek Yah, because Yah may be putting you through this process that I just laid out here. Praise Yahuwah. Where before your heart really lays hold of the wisdom that Yah has for you, it's going to be a trial at first. And it's going to seem heavy. It's going to seem burdensome. Praise Yahuwah. But just like this passage says, just endure. Endure it and lay hold of her. Praise Yahuwah. And what you will find is that which you found to be grievous, that which you found to be burdensome, praise Yahuwah, will turn out to be a crown of esteem unto you. A robe of esteem and a crown of joy. That's what it says. Praise Yahuwah. It will turn to your favor if you just hang on. Praise Yahuwah. If you endure, if you allow Yah to do what He wants to do in your heart. Praise Yahuwah. And see, brothers and sisters, that I don't just say this because I'm reading out of a textbook. I mean, this is something that I've experienced myself. Praise Yahuwah. There are times in my life and in my walk with Yahuwah that I had lusts in my heart that I was dealing with. That I had some things in my heart that things that I desired. Praise Yahuwah. And I wasn't convinced yet that it wasn't Yah's will for me. Praise Yahuwah. So I pursued the desires of my heart. And Yah let me get in situations where I would pursue the desires of my heart. And it would be painful unto me. And it would be hard for me to let go of that which was in my heart that wasn't of Him. Praise Yahuwah. But when I let it go, praise Yahuwah, then the robe of esteem, the crown of joy, that I would have that breakthrough, praise Yahuwah, that I would experience what Sirach is talking about here. And when I got to that point, brothers and sisters, that's when the will of Yah in those areas of my life became an easy yoke in a light burden. Praise Yahuwah. So truly, His yoke is easy and His burden is light. But we have to be brought to a place, praise Yahuwah, where that is so for us. And when we're brought to a place where our heart is right with Yah, then that is true. Then all of that is true. That His commandments are not grievous, praise Yahuwah, and that His yoke is easy and His burden is light. Praise Yahuwah. That even when we're striving to enter in the hard-pressed way, still His yoke is easy, His burden is light, His commands are not grievous. Why? Because our heart is right with Him, and because we're able to accept His will. Praise Yahuwah. It's like a wild horse, and where you see a wild horse being broken, praise Yah, at the first, it's grievous unto that wild horse. It's just bucking and kicking. But once that wild horse is tamed, praise Yah, then that yoke, that harness that's upon him, it's not grievous anymore. Because that power of that horse is able to be harnessed in the right way. And if you've ever seen like Clydesdales or people that have horses in procession and they're orderly and they're well trained, and it's a beautiful sight because those horses have been broken. And that yoke that's upon them, it's as nothing to them. Praise Yahuwah, because they're more or less going in that way that they're being taken anyway. They just need some gentle direction here and there. And that's what it's like when our heart is right with Yah. Praise Yah. That, we just need some gentle correction here and there, some gentle direction here and there. It's not those hard jerks and hard pulls and cracks of the whip. See, that's what happens when we're rebellious. That's what happens when our hearts are not right with Yah, that we experience what that wild horse experiences. And that yoke is grievous unto us. Praise Yahuwah. So brothers and sisters, praise Yah, that we're all striving for perfection. And, that let's just let Yah do what He wants to do in our hearts. Praise Yah. Because I'm sure each of us could think of some area of our life where we're not perfected. Praise Yahuwah. Where accepting the complete will of Yah is not, that it is not something that we have totally and completely done. We may not be sinning. Praise Yahuwah. But as far as Yah, and see, Yah's merciful too. Yah's merciful. If we have some weak areas in our life that we haven't fully accepted the will of Yah, Yah may just keep us away from being tried in that area, just to deal with this, just to strengthen us, because He knows we're not ready yet. He knows we haven't fully accepted His will yet. But see, that day is going to come. Every man's work is going to be tried by fire. Praise Yahuwah. And Yah is going to search the innermost parts of our hearts, brothers and sisters, to see if we've really accepted the totality of His will in every area of our lives. And if there's any area where we haven't, it's going to show up when the light of Yah shines in our heart. We need to be ready for that day, brothers and sisters, each and every one of us. Praise Yahuwah. So, brothers and sisters, praise Yahuwah. Let's go on with Yah. Let's bear that easy yoke. Praise Yahuwah. That light burden, and strive to enter in the hard-pressed way. And with that, I will say, Shalom.